I'm live. All right. Hi, this is Michael Jones. We're back to talk um, about economic reports, and this is going to be very exciting, following up from Assistant Secretary Medina's conversation, because now we're going to talk about the size of our industries, and then have a dialogue among three kind of leaders in this space. We're going to start on the international side with Angel Calvo, who is the Deputy Head of Unit for DG MARE. They have been doing a economic analysis, markets, and impact assessments in Brussels, and I think the first one was 2017. He'll be followed, or she'll be followed by Carl Goldman. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit because I got the anyway. So Carl Goldman is the director of the U.S. Integrated Ocean Observing System, which is an office within NOAA's National Ocean Service, and it's a national regional partnership. And they have been doing a study in 2015, and Carl's going to share with us some of the results from the 2020 study, which is going to be very exciting. And then finally, we will come down from having done Europe, international, 27 countries, United States, across the country, to Tracy Rouleau, who is the president of TBD Economics. She used to be the deputy chief economist at NOAA, but she was engaged to do a study in San Diego region. And this was the first update since 2012 when we did a regional study. So it's going to be exciting to see the differences from 2012 to 2021. So, Angela, I'd like to turn it over to you first. And thank you very much for being with us. And I know it's getting late in the evening on a Friday, so thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor for me and for my institution to be part of this panel and also this fantastic event. So indeed, good morning and good evening from Brussels. It's for me a pleasure to give you the main insights, the main highlights of the Blue Annual Economic Report, of the Annual Economic Report on the blue economy. So in the next slide, you will see the objectives. Why do we do this report? What is the policy use of this report? So first, with this report, we try to build an overview of the EU blue economy based on the latest available data sets. Secondly, we try to have a good monitoring, precise monitoring on the blue economy in the EU over time. Here is important because we like to identify trends and also business opportunities for our industry. Third, we like to have with this report comparable figures across the different member states and also across the sectors, which is something important when it comes to understanding the dynamics of the blue economy. And finally, this report intends to provide economic analysis to support and to inform policy making and also help stakeholders in investment decisions. In the next slide, I can present the policy context, the policy uses for this report. In particular, the European Green Deal. So this report tries to provide evidence-based analysis. And as you know, that good data leads to informed decisions, and also support aspects like our biodiversity strategy and responsible food production. Also, this report helps or intends to help us in transforming the value economy, the value chains in the blue economy. And this in particular implies circular economy and decarbonization. And finally, we also try to get evidence to support the sustainable blue economy. So sustainability is a fundamental part. We are talking about blue, but also green economy. In the next slide, you will be able to see how does it work, how this process is operated. Here is fundamental to have the support of the scientists. That's why we work closely with the Joint Research Center of the European Commission and also with the scientific community But not only, also stakeholders and companies and businesses are important players in preparing this report, because we need to have the data, the interpretation, and the trends. And then in the next slide, I can show you some of the big numbers, if I can say it, the big figures about the blue economy in the European Union. So in terms of turnover, with the latest data that we have, the blue economy amounts to 650 billion. In terms of gross value added, which, as you know, is the contribution of this sector to the society in terms of salaries and also profits, the amount is 176 billion. Employment, almost 5 million people depend on the blue economy. And this is only direct employment. If we account the indirect employment, which is a difficult task and we are trying to develop, this figure will be much, much higher. And this clearly shows, at least from our perspective, the importance of the blue economy for the well-being and the communities in the EU. In the next slide, I can show you some of the main trends. I mentioned at the beginning that trends is an important question in this report. The main trends that we see in the established sectors, the so-called established sectors of the blue economy. So despite the name, these sectors are quite dynamic, and we are able to see that the shipbuilding and also the marine living resources are having important growth rates in recent years. We also see development in the coastal tourism. And then in terms of employment, is very important for the blue economy in the European Union, the contribution of the coastal tourism. In the next slide, we are focusing on the emerging sectors, which are fundamental, is a fundamental part of the analysis of this blue economy report. These sectors are incipient, they are in a phase of early development, but they have a high growth potential. And that's why they are a specific focus of our analysis. In particular, this report analyzes that around 70% of the ocean energy that has been produced globally has been produced by EU 27 European Union companies. Also, this report looks into the biotechnology, so new products that are helping to create business opportunities to our sectors in the European Union. Not only there, also we have the desalination, which for some countries in the Mediterranean region is an important sector in terms of securing the access to water, particularly for coastal communities. And of course, we couldn't forget the importance of the research and development and innovation. Around 2 billion euros have been invested in this sector, which provides important spillovers for the blue economy. In the next slide, I will present some novelties or some important drivers behind the blue economy, because it's not only the established sectors and the emerging sectors, but also what is happening right now. And of course, right now it's important to look into the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic into the development of the blue economy. And the report has analyzed this question. And we have seen that the established sectors have been quite hard, some have been hit very hard, in particular the coastal tourism in the European Union. We also saw, and this is an interesting piece of information, that the emerging sectors have been more resilient, have been able to navigate in these difficult times, in these COVID times. But it's not only COVID, also we look into the decarbonization process for the blue economy. And then we are building indicators to monitor the targets of CO2 emissions and the reductions that we are seeing in the blue economy in order to meet the objectives in terms of decarbonization. In the next slide, we are able to see also an important aspect of this report: sustainability. We try to build evidence and economic analysis to support this aspect in our policy making. For example, there you can see the trends that we are seeing in our fishing industry. On the one hand, the overfishing has been going down in a very systematic and gradual way. And at the same time, we see that a positive correlation with an increasing performance of the EU fishing fleet. This, for us and also for our fishermen, means that conservation pays off. And it's an important message when we build our policies. In the next slide, we also focus on the value of the marine ecosystem services. This is an important area which is technically very difficult to measure. We are trying, on the one hand, to analyze the potential impacts of the climate change in terms of the rising sea level and how this progressive erosion of our coastline could affect our economy. And we are trying to anticipate the scenarios. We are trying to identify areas that could be more vulnerable for the erosion, coastal erosion, and put in place the investments and the mitigating measures needed to alleviate these impacts. And not only there, the second aspect of analysis, which is still, I have to recognize we are in the first baby steps, is about giving a value to the marine, to provide, to give a value to the marine ecosystem service in the EU. We have started that, so it's not just GDP, it's not just the classical measurements. We like also to incorporate this value of the ecosystem services, the marine ecosystem services, into our decision-making process. At this moment, we are in the process of data collection methodologies, but we are very confident that we will be able in a few years to incorporate this assessment in our policy making and also analysis. And last but not least, the final slide, please. Well, the EU has different facades, different regions. And of course, while we're trying to present some key trends and key figures for the EU as a whole, we also have to focus on our regions. And then also these data sets and these indicators also are customized for the different regions, in particular the North Sea, Atlantic, Mediterranean Sea, etc., etc. And there you can see some examples how we measure also over time the development of the blue economy across our different maritime basins. So with this, we go to just my final slide to thank you. Thank you very much for your attention and to inform you that all this information and much more is available at the Blue Economy Report. Also, these data sets building the report are there. There is a tool, a Blue Indicators tool, we call it like that, also in this link, where you can get all these data sets and get some customized graphs and trends for the analysis. We believe that this transparency, this data is very helpful in not only for policymakers, but also for stakeholders and businesses in order to grasp these opportunities for sustainable development. So with this, thank you very much. Back to you, Chair.
Angel, thank you very much. That was really fabulous. And I've got some questions which we'll be putting to all of you and after we're done. So Carl, you're next.
Thanks. How's my audio?
Excellent.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm going to give you a little bit of rundown on a report that's going to come out in the first week in December, a study on the U.S. new blue economy business activities. Next slide. So as we've already heard today, and as you all know, I've got the EU report on this slide. The blue economy is projected to double by the year 2030 from 2015. And we all know from this Blue Tech Week how important the ocean is and how much attention it's getting right now. And so I'm really excited to be able to talk about this and to be in a role where I'm working for that whole of government solution as much as possible that Michael and Monica were talking about earlier. Next slide, please. So as an important part of an answer about what is the new blue economy within the blue economy, which I didn't cover in a lot of detail on that last slide, but the new blue economy is, as Dr. Spinrad, the head of NOAA right now, has defined it and described it as a knowledge-based economy looking to the sea, not for extraction of material goods, but for the data and information to address societal challenges and inspire their solutions. In less lofty terms, the new blue economy is described as an economy founded on emerging capabilities for acquiring data and developing knowledge that supports harnessing ocean resources for economic growth while protecting ocean health and ensuring social equity. So what are the components of this new blue economy? They are, in the study that I'm about to give you the results, we broke it down into providers of technical means to undertake ocean observations and measurements, producers of core public good ocean data and information, such as, for example, NOAA, and intermediaries who tailor ocean data and information to support a specific end user need, such as ensuring safety, operational efficiency, or protection of ocean health. Most of the provision of the technological means to undertake ocean observations and measurements and to turn the resulting data into actionable information takes place in the private sector. Stealing a term from the meteorological sector, who refer to the weather enterprise, we have called this business provision of the means to observe and measure the ocean and to turn the resulting data into something useful for a particular end use, the ocean enterprise. Next slide. So the first study of this type was done in the UK in 2019 and has been repeated annually since 2008 and up until 2019. And the first study in the US co-hosted or co-sponsored with the expertise of Michael Jones and the Maritime Alliance at the time was done in 2015, and we've repeated that study in 2020. And there's also been a similar study in Canada that has taken place in 2020 as well. Next slide. So the objective of trying to understand the scale and scope of the businesses in the United States in this ocean enterprise, we'd love to measure the real impact of every end user decision. That's one of the most difficult things to do. And so we're still trying to work on that problem. This study didn't try to tackle that sort of holy grail of really understanding all the end user benefits. This one tried to understand the providers and intermediaries and the data synthesizers, how they're contributing and how they're making money and finding markets in this sector. Next slide, please. So here's the headline summary results since 2015. We have about 300 new companies in this space in the last 5 years, 11 more states with companies in them, almost $100,000 more, 100,000 more employees, and almost $1 billion more in revenues. And this is a period of time that coincided with the pandemic as well. So that's a significant feature of some of the results that we found this year. Next slide. And give me 2 clicks, if you would, on this slide. So these boxes are highlighting for you, and I apologize, we have preliminary graphics that I had trouble blowing up to be able to read, but that says renewable energy. And what it shows you in the green bar is we have 52% of the companies say that they are working towards the market for renewable energy and in 2020 versus 26 in 2015. And in the water and water quality, 57% are working in those markets versus 27% in 2015. So I just highlighted those 2 market foci as interesting in the amount of change they saw in this 5-year period. And the rest of the market sectors are interesting as well. Next slide. And then the technology focus in terms of what the companies in this space are working on. The biggest growth was in the platforms and towed systems that are not autonomous. And that's not a surprise. If you've been involved with ocean issues, you know that the explosion of autonomy is creating great opportunities to do more observing, measuring, and therefore more services for people's end use decisions. And that's clearly an area of growth in this ocean enterprise. Next slide, please. And so the confidence as well was interesting from 2015 in blue to 2020 in orange here. We had many folks saying things expected to stay the same. Only 10% said decreasing. and 34% said increasing in 2020. And I thought that's a little less optimistic than they were in 2015. But given the pandemic, it's a fairly remarkable amount of optimism in terms of the ocean enterprise. Next slide, please. And here are, if you can only remember three things, these are comments we received from individual companies about the impacts of COVID-19. We added a few questions about that because the timing of this study hit right when the pandemic hit. So it forced greater attention to reducing the manpower required to deploy and operate systems because of the restrictions of travel and ship-based deployments, et cetera. It intensified economic challenges in the offshore oil and gas space. So that's been a trend that's been documented by the markets globally. And then it forced attention to diversification for that last reason, and because there are also products and services to be diversified and markets to diversify into. So next slide, please. So where are we heading? We are heading into a period of massive change in the markets for ocean enterprise products and services. And in the energy sector, achieving net zero by 2050 will demand an enormous growth in capture of offshore renewable energy, and especially offshore wind. If the projections recently made by the International Energy Agency hold true, the demand for ocean enterprise products and services to support this transition will probably exceed the current capacity of the industry. Similarly, changes in the use of ocean living resources and delivering a target designation of 30% of the ocean as marine protected areas, as well as monitoring enhanced natural and engineered use of the ocean as a carbon sink, will all demand new capacity in ocean observation and measurement and the supply of information services tailored to the specific needs of these growing markets. To add to this list are the demands of environmentally safe ocean mining, marine transportation, and the protection of coastal communities, infrastructure, and environments from rising sea levels. The list goes on, and with each area of delivering a future blue economy, making new and growing demands for ocean data, information, and knowledge. Next slide. So alongside this potential explosion in the needs for data, information, and knowledge is the rapid emergence of new technologies, tools, and techniques to meet these needs. Marine autonomy, new observing and sensing techniques such as environmental DNA and novel chemical and biological sensors, as well as new tools to interpret data and information, are going to transform how the ocean enterprise business cluster delivers the needs of a growing blue economy. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Michael. Thank you.
Carl, it's great, and it's great to see the results from the study coming out. I know that it's been not without its challenges, particularly during COVID. So we've heard a great presentation about what the EU has been doing over a series of years, and I'm going to come back to this. I've got some questions about the value of these kinds of comparative studies. And Carl, now the second study, very important. So I'd like to turn to Tracy Rouleau, who used to be at NOAA as a deputy chief economist and had run her own business for a number of years and worked on a study for us here in San Diego and the San Diego region. So Tracy, over to you to walk us through what you found from 2012 to 2021.
Sorry about that. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Tracy Rouleau. I'm the president of TBD Economics, which is a boutique environmental economics firm that focuses on advancing the blue economy, valuing the benefits that our oceans and coasts provide to people, and climate adaptation and resilience. I would like to thank our hosts, TMA Blue Tech, and especially Michael Jones. I've known Michael since 2012 when I was NOAA's deputy chief economist, and we talked about the 2012 San Diego Maritime Industry Report, which was hot off the presses back then. I was very pleased to partner with him on this update. I don't know anyone who is more passionate about advancing the blue tech economy, well, except for perhaps for Rick Spinrad. I'd also like to thank the funders of this study, the City of San Diego and San Diego County. Next slide, please. My presentation today will focus on some of the findings from a report on the San Diego blue tech economy that will be released later in the year. We know a lot about the maritime industry thanks to efforts to track the economic impacts and benefits of the maritime marine economy, such as ENOW, which is NOAA's Economics National Ocean Watch, and the new Marine Economy Satellite Account, which was developed jointly by NOAA and the Bureau of Economic Analysis. However, there are important parts of the blue economy that our national level statistics simply cannot measure well, and one of those is blue tech. Why? Well, the short answer is because it's complicated. As we'll talk about today, blue tech touches a lot of industries, and teasing out the details of the contributions that blue tech makes to local, regional, and the national economy takes some effort. The San Diego Blue Tech Economy Report contains 3 key pieces. It's got a lot of information in it, and I've only got about 10 minutes, so I will only be hitting the highlights. I do encourage all of you to read it when it is released by TMA Blue Tech later in the year. First, it provides an update on the 2012 San Diego Maritime Industry Report, providing employment and revenue numbers for the maritime economy in San Diego. It will also give insights on other key business indicators such as export regions, barriers to growth, and key providers of support. Second, the report will establish economic output multipliers for the blue tech economy in San Diego. For those of you who aren't economists, an economic multiplier is an estimate of the effect that spending in one industry has on another, related or connected industry. Third, the report will present an analysis of the blue tech cluster and using local case studies show the connections between the blue tech industry, its suppliers, and other companies that benefit from the strong presence of tech in this region. Next slide. So let's dive right in. This table shows the overall numbers for employment and revenue for both the maritime and blue tech industries in San Diego. The analysis covers over 5,000 maritime and blue tech companies. The big take-homes here are that the maritime industry and blue tech employ a lot of people in San Diego. Approximately 70,000 in maritime alone, and an additional 24,000 in blue tech, and then an additional 25,000 in industries that contribute to blue tech, but don't get 100% of their revenues from blue tech. These are what we call the partials, and are really the part that makes this so complicated. Think about companies that might make components or parts that are used in blue tech applications, but also in other places. Or companies that provide consulting services to blue tech industries and also to other industries. The partials are really the trickiest part for us to understand. Together, maritime, blue tech, and blue tech partial industries generated about $16.5 billion in revenues in 2020. And those are the industries, the companies only in the San Diego area. Again, this is a local study. And a couple of things to point out in this table. First, you'll see the big jump in maritime employment from 2012 to 2020. This is partially because of growth in the industry, but mostly because the report uses a much improved methodology and a much improved data set than the 2012 report was able to. We've made a lot of improvements over the past decade or so in our understanding of how to assess these economic indicators, and this table shows that. The 2012 and the 2020 numbers should not be compared, again, using different methodology, different data sets. They aren't as what we would call apples to apples. However, the current numbers present a very solid framework for comparisons moving forward and certainly allow us to look across some of the shared aspects of these reports. Second, I will say, as everybody said before me, 2020 was simply a bad year to do a study on revenues. COVID was tough on the industry overall, and especially on small businesses. Most of the blue tech in San Diego is small business. The median employee count for the companies we surveyed was 12 employees. I think Angel's presentation told a similar story. However, I think the impacts in San Diego were mostly to revenue, and you can see that there still are increases in employment. So the sort of short answer is, if I were to do this same study next year, I would expect those blue tech and the partial blue tech and the maritime revenue numbers to increase. Next slide, please. The real big take home from this report, and I'm going to say this a lot, I like to say it, is place matters. Throughout this study, this result came up over and over again, this concentration of skilled workers, suppliers, and businesses that drives the blue tech cluster in San Diego. And those benefits are all realized right here, I will say, but I guess it's right there because I'm not in San Diego, but that's where those benefits are realized. So this graph basically shows the proportion of businesses with more than half of their total revenues originating within the city of San Diego County, and the state of California. You can see that the biggest chunk, 36% of these sales, comes from other businesses within the city of San Diego. Looking to the county level adds about another 5%, and then heading out to the state level goes to about 3%. So these are San Diego blue tech cluster businesses where they're getting their revenue from other suppliers within the city. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the economic output multipliers for the blue tech economy in San Diego. Remember, an economic multiplier is an estimate of the effect that spending in one industry has on other related or connecting industries and the economy as a whole. This is blue tech only, does not include maritime industries. And I find these numbers really impressive. First, you should know that we looked at the spending by blue tech companies in their first tier and their first tier of suppliers. So the maximum economic output multiplier that we could possibly come to is 3. So the scale of our numbers is from 1 to 3. The table on the top of the screen, shows the economic output multipliers for the city, for the county, and the state, and compares them to the numbers that were found in 2014 from a study by the University of California at San Diego. The 2014 study began this process, but was very limited in the number of companies it assessed. The one company in the 2014 study was a small business that makes UAVs and sensors for ocean data collection. We were able to include a much more diverse set of companies, adding science analytics, technology design, and medium-sized technology manufacturing. And what struck us the most was that the shift to include more blue tech companies, a more diverse set, if you will, really only showed that impact locally. And you can see that on the graph on the right-hand side of the slide. You can see that the state multiplier really didn't increase that much, from 2.59 in 2014 to 2.68 in 2020. But the local impacts, particularly in the city, jumped up. So the city went from 1.74 to 2.26, and the county from 2.15 to 2.34. So those big jumps in the city and the county really show that as we understand the blue tech economy more, we understand more and more that what's local matters. This slide also shows a third graphic in the center bottom left, if you will, that shows the comparison of the economic output multipliers for blue tech compared to other familiar industries, pharma and medical manufacturing, biotech R&D, healthcare, and tourism. Blue tech clearly has a much stronger multiplier than many of the other industries. Next slide, please. So everybody's always asking economists for the big number, and we actually tend to avoid that. But I do like this big number, and I think it's an important one. We applied the multipliers that we came up with to the revenues that were identified in the survey, and came up with the total economic impact of blue tech. And so here you can see again, it doesn't change too much when you look at the city or then include the county in the state of California. But overall, blue tech gives about $25 billion to the local economy each year. Next slide. COVID. We've talked about this. You can't do a study in 2020 without at least talking about COVID. COVID contributed to some very, very difficult survey conditions. The worst I've seen and the worst some of our partners have seen, and very, very low response rates. You can see here that it was also tough on maritime and blue tech industries as well. with 65% of the businesses that we surveyed reporting decreased revenues because of COVID. And just so we're clear, this pie chart just shows the impacts from COVID, not from other factors. Next slide. I think this slide tells a little bit more of the story. Listed are the top barriers to growth of the businesses by the companies that we surveyed. We've color-coded them. Red indicates that they're COVID-related. The half reds and half blues indicate that is likely to be partially COVID-related, but we didn't want to attribute the entire amount to COVID, so those are kind of questionable, but also still something to be thinking about. And then the solid blue lines are the barriers to growth that we determined were not necessarily COVID-related. So we expect the COVID-related concerns will get back to normal in the next 18 months or so. There's certainly going to be some ongoing impact, but in particular, supply chain interruptions, we're getting better at that. Government-ordered shutdown, obviously, no longer the case. So that still leaves those sort of top three, the lack of skilled, well, so ignoring the top row, the second, number 2, 3, and 4, as big barriers. The lack of skilled labor, regulatory concerns, and lack of government incentives. And these are things that we can change. Very encouraging to hear Monica's talk earlier or just before our session. And so, I think, and of course, we know that NOAA's working on this. And so, and certainly the city of San Diego and San Diego County are interested because they're the ones who funded this study. They're the ones who asked for more information. So there's a lot of people working on these questions, but so here's, as we've identified the biggest barriers to the growth of these businesses in blue tech in San Diego. Next slide. So just to summarize, the key take-homes is that clusters rely on local suppliers, and local suppliers create higher economic multipliers. That's well-defined in economic theory, certainly proven, at least by this one study, and certainly others that have other similar studies. San Diego Blue Tech is mostly small business. That was an interesting, not surprising, but it was nice to see it sort of confirmed that it's mostly small businesses and that the supply chain matters. I encourage people that are San Diego Blue Tech business owners to look after your suppliers, buy local, keep that money in the fold. It will continue basically to advance the cluster and to advance everyone's success. Develop a skilled workforce is necessary. It was one of those big barriers we looked at on the previous slide to support blue tech companies. And continue this research on blue tech. You can see in the reports, this sort of whole session is about these reports that are updates from the previous one. You can see there's big changes. We're learning more, we're understanding how things change. I want to leave with this quote from the most recent report from the Ocean Foundation, who I actually think is next on the agenda, so I apologize if I'm stealing any of their thunder, but I do really like the report, the Blue Tech Clusters of America. I encourage you all to take a look. U.S. blue tech companies struggle to get access to workspace, funding, and specialized indoor tanks and outdoor testing facilities. In sum, the European Union, China, and Canada are unquestionably out-clustering the United States when it comes to the ocean economy. Now, on the theme of aqua optimism, I refer not to this quote, not to end the presentation with a gloomy message, but to end on a message of action. It's a challenge. This message is a challenge to take action, and we know that America and probably the folks on this webinar love a challenge. Conferences such as this contribute to the solution, and it will take the combined effort of government action and incentives, a well-trained, skilled workforce, and continued research efforts to build and continue to build this blue tech cluster and keep San Diego at the forefront of the blue tech economy. Next slide. I'd just like to say thank you to everyone for attending today. And I'd really like to thank our partners at the University of San Diego and at ARIS who have been laboring with us over the past 6 to 8 months to get this report finished. So that's all I have.
Well, thank you. Three very interesting presentations, starting international, coming to US, and then regional. I want to start first by again thanking the city and the county of San Diego. It took us 9 years to get the funding to do a study. I know, Carl, you've also, trying to get studies and taking the time, because everything takes time and money, right? And getting people to participate. So thanks to the city and the county in our case, but thank to you all, to each of the three of you. This work is incredibly important. As Peter Drucker kind of popularized the saying, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And what the three of you are doing is measuring. And so I have some questions, and I'm happy to have people put things in the chat, but I've got some questions I'd like to talk about. I don't really want to go into detail about your reports. I'd really like to talk more about the impact. Why are we doing this? And so I'll ask each of you, and we'll maybe change the order, but let's talk first about why are comparative reports important? Why did the EU, why is it every year doing a report? Why is that important? And then I guess a subsequent question, which you can start thinking about, is what have you learned from this? What have you learned from the process? What has surprised you? So first, let's talk about why is it important? So Hangil, why don't we start with you?
Yes, thank you. So, well, we started first to try to build a basis that is comparable. And that was the first challenge with 27 member states. So data is not always comparable. And we felt it was time to talk to each other, to the national offices, and try to build a common ground, try to understand the development of the blue economy in the European Union. I can tell you that the first report was a challenge, comparability issues, questions on harmonization. But over time, and now with this edition that we are now producing for 2022, we are confident that we are able to measure, as you mentioned, it's super important. It's very important for us to be able to measure the progress on the blue economy. And then why? So there are areas, for example, the common fisheries policy, our policy. And then we have a key message to share with our stakeholders. And the message, and I already mentioned in the presentation, is conservation pays off. And that can be seen in the numbers. And that's very important because when you meet stakeholders, NGOs, fishermen, you say, well, guys, if you invest in resources, if you invest in sustainable fishing, in selective fishing gears, in fuel efficiency, you get more benefits. You get better results in the long term. And the data is there. So this has an important effect, but not only there, not only in the fisheries sector, also in other sectors of the blue economy, for example, in the coastal tourism, which is associated also to more to environmental values. We see that there is an attraction for areas that are well preserved. We are talking about marine protected areas, etc., etc. So for us, it's fundamental for our policy making. Voila.
Voila, there you go. So Carl, again, why is this important? And I think Ankhil was starting to get into a little bit the process as well. And again, I want to also get your reaction of what has surprised you through this process, particularly where you've been doing it, in Ankhil's case, every year. In the case of the IUS program, it's been a 5-year gap. So why is it important?
Thanks. I've got a couple of four-legged office mates who might make some noise here, but the bottom line is what you said up front, right? If you're going to manage it, you need to measure it. And so you asked also, why is it important to repeat? So having one data point is just that, one data point. And you getting trends information and understanding change over time and why there may be changes is important. And then why this study in the first place, the shape and size of the companies that are working in this field of the ocean enterprise. There's so many different varied types and types of companies, the size of the companies, the distribution of the companies. And we need to understand that because in the government, we're providing services as a public good. Private sector on top of that is adding another layer of services, and they're finding markets and opportunities there. That means jobs and income for people, as well as solutions to problems or challenges we face. And so with the ever increasing impact of severe weather, storms, and climate all across the globe, the challenge is growing. And so to be able to meet those challenges for humanity, we have to be able to partner with many different types of participants, the whole of government approach, but with nonprofits, with private sector, with academia. And so to innovate in order to solve the challenges, we need to be able to understand who those problem solvers are, how to interact with them, how to set up engagements, how to help clusters thrive and survive for the long haul, and move things forward. With that, I'll stop and see if you want to tease out a little further detail in the next minutes.
Well, I'm going to ask Tracy now to talk about why is it important, and then we're going to come back and go, what have you learned from the process and what has surprised you? All right. So Tracy, why is it important first?
Well, I think the biggest important to do these sort of continued studies is because so much is changing. In particular, in an industry such as blue tech, the nerd in me, thinks about the rich research potential that's available. But the business owner in me says that these companies are moving at the speed of light. Change is happening just as quickly. And for us to continue to advance this clearly important local and regional industry sector, we really need to understand what's changing and how it's changing.
Great answers. So my next question then is, what did you learn from the process and what surprised you? And then right behind that is, what did it mean? In other words, did you get more funding? Did you get more press coverage? Did you get more political support? So let's talk first about what did you learn from the process? Carl, why don't we start with you, with the process and what surprised you between 2015 and 2020, and what's the implications? I mean, did 2015 help you on the Hill, for example?
Yeah, I don't know on that last question on the line of sight directness. However, I do know that I learned that the variety and types of companies is way greater than I understood before, well, a lot greater than I understood before. And that the way we interact with companies, because of their variety, needs to be varied as well, so that we're meeting companies where their needs are, and then partnering with folks like you to set up the engagements, the opportunities for networking, business to business, business to government, government to business, that there's a huge amount of work to be done there. And so that in and of itself is important. I think that the study itself and the information in there has helped us to shine a light on the importance of ocean issues to business. And that's something that does resonate on the Hill on both sides of the aisle. And so that has definitely helped. And then I've learned about companies who've used our report as a part of their business case to get venture capital. And that's pretty exciting to me, that there's a company now that exists that part of their getting to become a company, they used our report. And so it's players like that we want to know, okay, that helped you get started, and how's it going, and how do we interact with you moving forward so that you can expand and grow your ability to meet market needs and find revenue opportunities for you. But also, like I said, the whole thing is about solving problems so that we can succeed as a civilization on this big blue planet.
Yeah. So Tracy, I'll jump over to you. What have you learned from the process, and what surprised you? You have a longer history of being the former deputy chief economist at NOAA, and when we began this idea of we saw our study and then the 2015 study, which Carl and the ICE program put together. What surprised you, and what have you learned from the process?
Yeah, well, it's funny. I have been studying the blue economy for a long time, and I think the thing that surprised me the most was just how much place matters. So, so for those of you in NOAA, I worked a lot on the sort of non-business side of things, the natural resource side of things, and NOAA talks about how place matters there, and all of these efforts to improve our climate adaptation efforts and improve our fisheries, all are based on this sense of place. We talk about it all the time. And seeing that just come out so crystal clear in this industry analysis, to me said, well, I mean, it was kind of a little bit of an aha moment, like, well, of course this should matter. But it was just seeing it come out quite so clearly in the data, I think was what I think surprised me the most and interested me the most. I also was very impressed by the change in the multipliers based as we learned more about the blue tech economy. It doesn't seem, those numbers probably don't seem like a big jump, but they really are based on the fact that we're looking at a scale of 1 to 3 for these multipliers, and that we've gone up by in half a point in some cases, and so it's a pretty big jump again to learn about more of this, the diversity of this economy. And I think that, of course, for me, it's always now it's, well, I'm dying to learn more, but that jump as we spread our tentacles out, I think through the different parts of the blue economy a little bit more, and showed it builds a richer and a stronger story.
Yeah, I think this issue of that's why clusters develop in certain places, and why the supply chain matters so very much. And to the best of our knowledge, this is one of the first supply chain studies, but multiplier effect studies. And we had done something with San Diego State in 2014, and so by integrating into this study, it is incredibly rich to find out that this has such a high multiplier, because part of the story is, compared to other industries, it's frankly much higher. So Ankhil, you spend with your group, I mean, your business is studying. I mean, and you probably live this all year round. So what has surprised you over the years you've been doing the annual study? And then I'm going to come back to you and ask you, what did you learn from each other at the end? I don't want to do that yet, but what surprised you in the studies as you go from year to year?
Well, something that was very surprising for us and for my team, our team, is that there are a number of enablers, of factors that are around the blue economy, which are fundamental to explain and to understand what is happening in our blue economy. In particular, the sustainability, which is affecting some of our blue economy sectors, most of them actually, but also data. Data, good quality data, high quality data is a fundamental enabler to allow this sustainable blue economy. And then something that we learned is perhaps our challenge ahead is try to build and to gather more data on the emerging sectors. For us, these sectors that are still limited, small size, but they have a high growth potential, and for which they are very difficult to collect data. They are one of our challenges ahead in order of improving the analysis. And we hope we will be able to do it.
What was the first year? Was it 2017? What was the first year you did an annual study?
2017, indeed.
Okay.
2017.
So this is 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. So this is your fifth study. Fifth annual study. Yeah. So one of the things that has happened, if you think about the understanding and awareness of the blue economy, Carl's heard me say this, but in 2010, I went to Department of Commerce and met with two people from Department of Commerce, two people from the U.S. Commercial Service, and with a person from NOAA. And the person from NOAA said, correctly at the time, we're scientists, we don't do business. Today, Rick Spenrad, if you heard him yesterday, talked about the new blue economy, and Carl's talked about it, and the studies, the 2015 study, the 2020 study. There's just no question that NOAA is thinking, doing, helping promote a vibrant, sustainable blue economy today. And these studies, I think, are an integral part of it. But you think back to 2010, and I think that the blue growth strategy, we started in 2007, so TMA Blue Tech. began in 2007. That's the first year that the Blue Growth Strategy started at the European Commission. And yet it was 2017 for the first study. It was 2015 for the first IU study. We did our first study in San Diego in 2012. And the reason I say that is that I think the drumbeat and the recognition of the blue economy and blue tech is picking up, which it should do. And the fact that we're going to have people from Department of Energy, Department of Commerce, State Department, in addition to Monica Medina being with us earlier, there is a whole of government approach in the United States that is probably much more pronounced than it was before. So I'm wondering now, with that as backdrop, what do you think these reports? I'm going to go back and add it a little bit different way. How important are these reports? So Ankhil, when you have these 5 reports, and I'm sure you go to European Parliament, or somebody does, whether it used to be Bernard Fries or who it was, but somebody goes and talks to the legislators in the European Parliament, and they have to think about funding. How important has it been to have these studies? Very quickly, because then I want to ask what you learned from each other. Has it been important?
It has been fundamental. And actually, I will tell you that from all these events where we present this report, we get more and more demands to add, for example, ecosystem services, to add more on emerging sectors, things like that. And there is a feedback, a positive feedback. This also have an effect on the public funding and, of course, the private decisions. So I think we are in the right trend.
Great. Carl, you next, and then we're going to go back and what did you learn from each other? So, what's the effect of these studies as far as you're concerned?
They're foundational information that shine light on such an important arena. And people all over the globe, we're doing a better job of teaching and spreading the word about how important the oceans are. But that's something that is ongoing. And the challenges and solutions ahead rely on ocean information in general and very specifically. And to jump to your next question, I learned that some of the sectors in our study that show growth in markets are similar to what's in the European Union. And you use those pieces of information to build your program too. It's like, we're working on more biological sensors, and I'm wondering, is that the right investment to be making? And then you see the need in a study like this in multiple places. And that's affirming and telling you you're in the right direction. And then the other piece that I learned that I already knew, but I love the new expression, is place matters. And so with our network in IUSE, we have local and regional stakeholders feeding into a regional non-federal system and then into a national system. And to meet the needs, you need to understand things at a local level often to actually get to decisions that make a difference in humans' lives. And so I answered both your questions at once to try to save time.
Excellent, Carl. You're the man. All right, Tracy, and then we'll end up with Ankhil. But Tracy, what do you think? What's the impact? And then what did you learn from the other 2 presenters today?
Well, so, I think arguably I'm probably the biggest blue economy nerd on this call today, although Angel maybe it's got me beat. But, what I learned is that there's a lot of things that we see that are similar. I'm a little jealous of 5 years of annual reports because I think that's absolutely fantastic. And I've followed them since they started coming out in 2017. But what I learned is that, not really learned, but I think I knew this and it was just reinforced, is that it takes understanding at all of the different levels, right? The on the ground stuff matters, and those are where the reports are the fewest and the furthest between, but they really tell potentially the biggest story. The national stuff doesn't change that much from year to year. And then the last thing I did just want to put a plug in for the emerging industries work that's being done in the European Union. I think that's something we are working on getting on in the United States and have made some progress, but you guys are ahead. And what was the last question, Michael?
That's enough. We've got 30 seconds, so I'm gonna let Ankhil. Ankhil, what did you learn from the other 2 today? And again, you've got very little time.
So the output multipliers, and I have to say that I am very jealous. So I will discuss that with my team, and we will like also to get inspiration from you colleagues and try to also catch up. But I think we are we are learning very good things here.
You guys were fabulous, incredible panel. The work you're doing is incredibly important. Thank you very much. Thank you for being with us. If you have time, please join us, although until we know it's late there. So thank you again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Good to
Thank
see
you.
Carl.
You too. Et voilà.